This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. We have so much to get into today, but we have to start with LA Mayor Karen Bass, the woman who has been nothing but a failure and a complete disaster for the people of Los Angeles. Her handling of the deadly wildfire crisis was appalling from the very start. We know that. And now Karen Bass just continues to prove what a weak leader she really is. She's decided, well, not to take accountability for her many mistakes which contributed to the fires becoming so catastrophic, such as fleeing to Ghana when she was warned about the fires. No, she's decided to pass the blame and has fired LA Fire Chief Kristen Crowley, who was forced to admit on live television that Karen Bass's decision to cut the fire department's budget by $17 million just months before the wildfires impacted the fire department's ability to respond.
Did the city of Los Angeles fail you and your department and our city?
It's my job to stand up as a chief and exactly say justifiably what the fire department needs to operate to meet the demands of the community.
Did they fail you?
That is our job, and I tell you, that's why I'm here. So let's get us what we need so our firefighters can do their jobs.
Who knew that taking millions of dollars out of a fire department's budget, while there are fire trucks that need repairs, there are not enough firefighters on the ground, would limit the way firefighters could respond to a major fire event? And if Karen Bass had it her way, those budget cuts would have been even larger. She initially wanted the budget slashed by $23 million. Now Karen Bass, well, she's finally admitted that she made a mistake by flying off to Ghana while California was burning and residents were losing everything. But in her first sit-down interview since the disaster, her chance to be open and frank with the American people, she tried to play dumb.
Although there were warnings, I think our preparation wasn't what it typically is, meaning that before there's a major weather event, for example, last week when we knew we were going to get into the rains, you saw us come together and us talk about, you know, get your sandbags, bring the K-rails out. That type of preparation didn't happen. If that had, I will tell you, Alex, I wouldn't have even gone to San Diego, let alone leave the country.
But what do you mean there were warnings you weren't aware of? Because I know we were talking about it on the news. A lot of people were talking about the problems, warning that this was going to be a huge deal.
So when I talked about it with the fire chief, what she said is that we have warnings of Santa Ana winds a lot, but predicting this, and you saw, from the city, from the county, that level of preparation really didn't happen. So it didn't reach that level to me to say something terrible could happen and maybe you shouldn't have gone on the trip.
Why didn't it happen?
But to me, I don't know.
So she claims she wasn't really warned, then admits that she was kind of warned, and she still can't tell you why they were so bad. I mean, what a load of BS. How on earth is that good enough? But Karen Bass is now going to extreme lengths to not only pass the blame, but to try and polish her own image, because her image as a politician, that is what's really important here. Her office has been caught out editing key questions from press conferences and those videos posted to her official Facebook page, where she's questioned about her handling of the wildfires. The LA Times reports that multiple videos from her press conferences that appear on her social media pages actually cuts off when the reporters are asking critical questions. I mean, what a joke. The journalists are in that room asking the questions that the people of Los Angeles need answers to, yet she provides none. How on earth is she still in the position of mayor? I mean, how insulting for everyone in LA after what they've been through and what they're still going through. But LA residents, don't worry. Failed presidential candidate Kamala Harris has been on the ground to save the day, and her message is really comforting and bound to make a difference.
What goes through your mind when you see this? You're here, you're now seeing it up close.
It's not only seeing it, Alex, you can smell it. You can feel it, right? So it's seeing it with our eyes, and many people have seen it. You all are covering it. But to literally be on the ground here, you can smell the smoke that was here. You can feel the toxicity, frankly, of the environment. You can feel the energy of all of the folks who are still here on the ground.
And to think we came close to having Kamala Harris lead the country is a scary thought. Joining us now is James Billow, editor at Unheard. James, thank you for joining us. Firstly, let's start with Karen Bass. It's been nearly 2 months since the devastating wildfires, and Karen Bass just continues to deflect, offering no real answers. It's just insulting. I mean, what's your assessment of her handling? She's doing a sit-down interview claiming that she wasn't really warned about the fires, and she's now taken the action to fire the chief of the LA Fire Department.
This is exactly the problem with having these mono-party states in which the same leaders get elected over and over and over. You put crap in, you get crap out. And there has just been absolutely zero accountability for California's leadership, and ditto for Los Angeles. And no one exemplifies that better than Karen Bass herself. I mean, not only was she on the other side of the world when the fires happened, but then in the recent weeks, she's actually started blaming her team for not alerting her about the potential of a fire happening. So there's been absolutely zero responsibility taken by her here. And it's just incredibly frustrating to watch that she's still in this position of power and really not getting much done. There's something like 4.5 million tons of debris in Los Angeles now, and there's been zero effort to clean that up. And I just do not know what's going on over there.
Oh, my heart absolutely breaks for everyone in LA, and then having to listen to her speak and deflect and taking no responsibility. And then we've seen Kamala Harris touring the fire-ravaged parts of Los Angeles, offering nothing but waffle, really. You know, I just think, haven't the residents of LA been through enough with Karen Bass, Gavin Newsom? Why put them through having Kamala Harris on the ground and having to listen to her?
Some of the clips going around at the moment. There's one where she's asked to detail about what she's seen across the state, and all she can conjure up is just the horrible smell that's come. And decades of experience in politics should have probably given her a bit more of a grounding on what to say here. And the answer she gave was something a 10-year-old could have given. It just smells bad. Okay, well, great. What's the political insight there? The frustrating thing with Kamala Harris is that she never seems to quite escape from the limelight. And polling suggests that she is still the #1 choice for the 2028 Democratic presidential candidate. And when you just get these word-salad people like Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, you're never going to win an election. And it's so frustrating to watch.
Absolutely. So frustrating. Look, I want to talk to you about USAID. It's facing more cuts. The Trump administration is eliminating 1,600 at the agency and placing the majority of the remaining staff members on administration leave globally. Now, it comes as even more examples of waste at USAID is coming to light. Nearly $1 million was sent to a Gaza-based charity, Bayada for Environment and Development Association, which has links to terror group Hamas. Also, $1.5 million was slated to advance diversity, equity and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and businesses. And of course, there was $70,000 spent on a program for a DEI musical in Ireland. I mean, there are just so many examples of waste here. It's unbelievable. What's the reaction been to this latest development of more cuts?
Yeah, well, that trans play in Colombia was definitely my standout as well. And also things like $20 million spent on Sesame Street production in Iraq. I don't know why Iraqis were so desperate to watch the performance, but anyway, yeah. I've never seen Donald Trump enter this part of the administration with such momentum. Actually, he's just over a month in, and his polling is still pretty solid, in fact. And usually you tend to see a bit of a downturn, but clearly there is big public support for what's going on here and rooting out this corruption, this waste, and these bureaucratic hurdles that have so beset the federal government in the last 40, 60 years. So he has the public backing in doing this. Now, the question is, can he start really getting his scythe in and taking out more and more that needs to be done? Because it's all well and good taking off this low-hanging fruit, but there are much more substantial cuts to be made in the federal government. But look, it's only been a month. Let's give him time. Let's see how he does. But he does very much have public support still on his side.
Yeah, it's a good point. Although Democrats are no longer attacking Trump, well, of course they still are, but they're really going after Elon Musk. And what a cruel person he is, because he sent an email demanding that federal employees simply list their accomplishments in the past week or they're going to be fired. Now, Donald Trump was asked about this and he is standing by Elon Musk.
You're talking about the last email that was sent where he wanted to know what you did this week. You know why he wanted that, by the way? I thought it was great. because we have people that don't show up to work and nobody even knows if they work for the government. So by asking the question, tell us what you did this week, what he's doing is saying, are you actually working? And then if you don't answer, like you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired, because a lot of people are not answering because they don't even exist. They're trying to find, that's how badly various parts of our government were run by, and especially by this last group.
It's amusing that there are still people out there arguing with this, that if you have staff that can't tell you what they did each day, let alone each week, and they're being paid by the taxpayer, surely they have to go.
Of all the things that Democrats could get Elon Musk on, and there are many, this seems to be one of the worst targets yet. I mean, it's a pretty simple request. Just tell us what you did last week. I don't know why it's been taken with such gusto by parts of the Democratic circles that this is suddenly this incredibly scandalous thing to ask of your employees. It's actually incredibly common practice in the private sector. So, yeah,
yes, it is.
It seems bizarre to me. And I'd also add, I'm not really sure what Trump meant by semi-fired, but I have no doubt that they will go through these potential termination of contracts. And 1,600 people have now been cut out of USAID. I suspect we're going to be seeing very similar terminations happening elsewhere in the federal government as well. The one thing to note here is that there have been some carve-outs. So Pete Hegseth of Defense, Kash Patel of the FBI, Tulsi Gabbard of National Intelligence, these are obviously all departments with big national security concerns. So they have actually been requesting a carve-out and said, actually, you don't need to proceed with Elon Musk's request because some of the stuff you're doing is sensitive. But again, it's sending shivers through the bureaucracy because they're not used to this kind of thing. They're not used to going to the office. They're not used to actually having to send in their work at the end of the week. And this is a real shakeup, and it's something that is desperately needed.
Absolutely, we're seeing that, aren't we? Now, Trump has announced that Dan Bongino will serve as the next deputy director of the FBI. Trump posted on Truth Social, "Great news for law enforcement and American justice. Dan Bongino, a man of incredible love and passion for our country, has just been named the next deputy director of the FBI by the man who will be the best ever director, Kash Patel." James, what will the FBI look like under Kash Patel and Dan Bongino?
Well, I'm really intrigued because they've now got two complete outsiders with zero FBI experience. And while Democrats may try to criticize them for that, I think that's actually a real strength. Bongino, he does have a background in the police. He was serving at the New York Police Department, and he was also a Secret Service agent for some time. So he does have some quote unquote deep state experience. And again, that is also important because you need to know how these bureaucracies actually operate and how they function and what they can get from them. So I think this is a really exciting time in American politics. I'm intrigued to see where it goes.
Look, Australia's Treasurer Jim Chalmers is set to visit the US for talks, including talks about tariffs. He's going to continue to push for steel and aluminium tariff exemptions. Our Treasurer Jim Chalmers says that he'll be holding one-on-one conversations with his Treasury counterpart. What do you suspect is going to come out of this? What's the plan with Donald Trump and tariffs? Do you think Australia is safe?
I would be, if I was an Australian, I would be feeling pretty optimistic right now. Australia were actually exempted from tariffs in the first Trump presidency, and I suspect we're going to see something similar here. The key reason being is that actually the US runs a surplus with Australia, something like $15 billion. So where Trump likes to criticize Canada, Mexico, and European partners for not putting their weight in, well, this is the issue, that because they run a deficit with them. But because Australia actually runs a surplus, I think that's a real plus point. I'd also add that Australia, unlike Europe and NAFTA, it serves a really important partner in the Indo-Pacific, and it's a key bulwark against China. So when you have all these factors together, and let's not forget the AUKUS deal, where they have just signed a $500 million nuclear submarine deal, I think a lot of these factors are pointing in a very positive direction for Australians.
And it appears that Apple is making decisions to avoid tariffs. Donald Trump said that Apple CEO Tim Cook promised him that the tech giant's manufacturing would shift from Mexico to the United States. And today, Apple has announced that it plans to invest more than $500 billion in the US over the next 4 years, including plans to hire 20,000 people and build a new server factory in Texas. Is this the Trump effect, with more investment coming into the States?
Well, they might not say so, but it certainly is. I mean, it's no coincidence this has happened 5 weeks after Donald Trump has entered office and just a few weeks after tariffs have come into effect. Apple obviously has a lot of operations in Asia, most notably China, which is a key adversary of the United States. And, something very similar happened in Trump's first term where they promised a £250 million investment, $250 million investment in America and American production. And it's also no mistake that these kind of operations are building up in red states like Texas and Arizona, very popular with Trump's constituencies. So I think it's very hard to dismiss the fact that, yes, after these tariff announcements came more domestic production from Apple. Now, it's not completely perfect because they are also expanding in other parts of Asia like Vietnam and India. But the fact that it's looking to decouple from China, I think, is a great sign for American national security interests.
Finally, James, I want to get your thought on what Vice President J.D. Vance has had to say. He delivered a pretty powerful message for young men at CPAC. Let's take a listen.
My message to young men is don't allow this broken culture to send you a message that you're a bad person because you're a man, because you like to tell a joke, because you like to have a beer with your friends, or because you're competitive. It's our cultural message is I think that it wants to turn everybody, whether male or female, into androgynous idiots who think the same, talk the same, and act the same. We actually think God made male and female for a purpose, and we want you guys to thrive as young men and as young women, and we're going to help with our public policy to make it possible to do that.
Look, I suspect that this message really resonates, especially after years of the Me Too movement, plenty of years of the left shaming men. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think without doubt the pendulum has swung too far the other way since 2015. And in the Western world, not just America, we have hit this crisis point in what masculinity truly means. And Democrats tried to propose their own version of masculinity through Vice President Tim Walz, and that was cast out pretty quickly. I think what J.D. Vance is doing is actually tapping into a real malaise across America and what's going on. I mean, just to run through some stats, labor participation, college enrollment, high school enrollment, they're all just going in a downturn for men compared to women. So this is like a really important point he has to make, and I really hope the Republican administration can do something about it.
James Billow, editor at Unheard. So good to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you.
Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky claims that he's willing to resign if it meant that Ukraine would be accepted into NATO.
If it's about peace in Ukraine and you really want me to leave my position, I am ready to do that. Secondly, I can exchange it for NATO if there is such an opportunity. I'll do it immediately without a long conversation about it. I'm focused on Ukraine's security today and not in 20 years. I don't plan to be in power for decades.
Now, this comes after Donald Trump called Zelensky a dictator for cancelling elections and accused Ukraine of starting the war. Now, Trump says that the US has given billions of dollars to Ukraine to defend itself against Russia, and essentially, America needs that money back and should have the rights to hundreds of billions of dollars worth of critical and rare earth minerals. Zelensky insists that the $100 billion in aid from the US was a grant, not a loan. But Donald Trump, speaking at the White House today, told reporters that a deal is close with Ukraine.
It looks like we're getting very close. The deal's being worked on, and we're, I think, getting very close to getting an agreement where we get our money back over a period of time. But it also gives us something where I think it's very beneficial to their economy, to them as a country. But, you know, we're in for $350 billion. How we got there, I don't know. But that's a lot of money, a lot of money.
Let's bring in GB News host Darren Grimes. Darren, great to see you again. What's going to happen here? Are we really going to see Zelensky step down as he claims that he might? And are we going to see Ukraine agree to this deal with the US?
Look, I think this is a form of power play. I think this is Zelensky making clear he's not a dictator. That was the charge that President Trump put to him. Now, look, I think there will ultimately be a deal because there has to be. Ukraine has no option here. And I think it's only fair and right for American taxpayers to try and be able to scrape back some of the money that they've spent ensuring, let's be absolutely frank, that Ukraine right now doesn't have a Russian flag planted in the middle of it. So, look, I understand all of that, but I do agree even with Sir Keir Starmer. Now, I put it like this. I don't say this very often, but they're all singing from the same hymn sheet here. And these globalists have all said that the Ukrainian position is sacrosanct, right? And that President Trump is some kind of orange dictator himself. That was the narrative, certainly from our very own Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party in this country. So this is major, this is significant, but let's not kid ourselves, right? Ultimately, Putin, if we don't have ironclad security guarantees, well, this entire thing is about as useless as a chocolate teapot, because we have to ensure that they don't come back once Putin's munitions are no longer as low as they are, and that his economy isn't on life support, which I'm sure he'll be able to turn around in a few years without international sanctions. So that's where actually the European plan, I think, is right and necessary, but it has taken President Trump in that peace through strength approach to actually broker such a deal. I am confident, as he is, that a deal will be struck, but we've got to ensure that the European response isn't one to flim-flam about on projects like net zero, which are immiserating Europe and its economies, and instead focus on defence and security.
It's interesting, Ukraine will not be able to join NATO. Donald Trump has made that crystal clear, and there are concerns about what security Ukraine will have to avoid a conflict in the future. And what we're witnessing at the moment is just a complete shift in approach to the war. The US did not vote in support of UN resolution condemning Russia's war against Ukraine. I suppose for Donald Trump, he's dealing with Putin. He's trying to get a peace deal here. Is this just part of the strategy?
Oh, absolutely. The art of the deal, the man is textbook. This isn't a politician we're talking about. This is a man who made his billions in real estate. This is a man who shakes and signs on the dotted line in a really hard line way. But I think the question European electorates, and actually even in Australia as well, have to ask themselves is, why have we got millions who'd rather, glue themselves to the road in protest against fossil fuels, which have, dragged us out of children dying in childbirth, over actually being willing to fight for their own freedoms? That's what I think whenever I hear someone say that Europe would go out to fight for Ukraine. Actually, I'm not sure many Europeans would fight for Europe, never mind a Ukrainian economy that's pretty alien to them. So there are wider questions for the Western world itself, and the Trump moment is an unfrozen moment to try and rebalance those priorities, because right now I think they're nuttier than a fruitcake.
Well, Donald Trump has told reporters that he thinks the war in Ukraine could end within weeks. That would be extraordinary. We know Zelensky says that he hopes that it will end at some point this year. But I want to talk to you about what is going on in the UK, because it appears that the UK government does not care about privacy or your privacy. Earlier this month, the government requested backdoor access to user data that even Apple doesn't have access to. Now, Apple refused, but has taken the unprecedented step of removing its highest level data security tool from customers. That's advanced data protection. So essentially, Britons can no longer encrypt data because the government wants to access it. Security experts are absolutely blasting this for weakening online security and privacy. What are the implications of this, Darren?
The implications are absolutely huge. London is considered a tech hub. It's certainly the tech hub of Europe, if not major parts of the world too. And that reputation lies in tatters now, because what we have done is said that there is no innovation that you can bring in Britain if actually that innovation is a privacy first innovation. You know, this iPhone that I've got here is about as much use as a chocolate teapot when it comes to defending me from the likes of Chinese outliers, were they wanting to access my information. It's a bit like, I would describe it as leaving a key under a doormat and only expecting your friends and family to know that it's there, and hoping and praying that someone with nefarious interests doesn't get there first and scout out about and see if they can case the joint. That's effectively what we've done to the technology of millions of users of smartphones in the United Kingdom. And it opens up wider implications for Apple's response, not just Apple, but primarily Apple's response in wider parts of the world. Will Russia be asking for this backdoor? Will China be asking for this backdoor? You know, Chinese authoritarians would absolutely love to get their mitts into the encrypted data of Australians, for example. You've had plenty of spy scares in your country. You know, we've known our dilly-dalliance with Russians trying to hack things. It is just such an enforced error. And they say to me, Darren, you must be on the side of paedophiles for supporting this. I say no. If you are concerned about paedophiles talking to young children online, what we need is robust parenting. What we need are safeguards of parents actually monitoring what their child is doing online. And actually, they shouldn't have a smartphone in the first place. But if they do, monitoring what your child is doing, there are plenty of tools in which you can do that. Regardless, you should not be opening up a backdoor that's vulnerable to attack from actors who do not wish us well. It is naive and extreme.
Donald Trump is celebrating after German Conservative Friedrich Merz claimed victory in the national election. Trump posted to Truth Social, "Looks like the Conservative Party in Germany has won the very big and highly anticipated election. Much like the USA, the people of Germany got tired of the no common sense agenda, especially on energy and immigration that has prevailed for so many years." Darren, is he right here? What is your assessment of this election? We've seen that Europe has had a clear shift to the right in the European elections and various national polls, but has he got a point? People are sick and tired of this no common sense rule.
Well, yes, I think Europeans are increasingly sick of that. And I think especially in Germany, where we've seen a spate of terror attacks, that there is a clamour for security and common sense when it comes to the borders. Angela Merkel's legacy lies completely ruined. But I'm afraid to say that what Germany has secured right now is the Uniparty. It's more of the same. This is the same coalition that Angela Merkel had on no fewer than 3 occasions throughout her premiership. This will not bring about common sense in Germany. I do not think that there will be a united view on a sensible energy policy that doesn't bankrupt a once bastion of manufacturing throughout the world. I think it won't lead to common sense on border security and tackling what has become a really potent Islamic extremism. It's almost like she should have thought twice before inviting 1 million Syrians into their country. But ultimately, they've got more of the same. This is more of the same. So I'm afraid Trump is right in one way only, that we have seen extremes on both left and extremes on both right. And that's not me saying that they are extremist parties, but they are on the fringes of politics right now, because the centre is basically 2 sides of the same cheeks, I'm afraid. So ultimately, I think this will play out to strengthen the Alternative for Deutschland's vote, when inaction and inertia is what is guaranteed in Germany. So I would expect it won't be plain sailing, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few years we see yet another election.
I want to talk to you about Nigel Farage. Donald Trump has used part of his speech at CPAC to praise Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. Let's take a listen.
The leader of the UK Reform Party, who, by the way, did really well in that last election. I've been his friend for a long time, and I wasn't sure, am I supposed to be his friend or not? But it never mattered to me if he did well or not. I always liked him. But it's easier to like him when he got the kind of votes he got. He really took it by storm, but they say he's going to do even better this time. Nigel Farage. Where is Nigel? Thank you, Nigel. Thank you. What a great guy.
It's an endorsement, that's for sure. Not a surprising one coming from Donald Trump. And Nigel Farage still has a mountain to climb, but it appears that the momentum is still well and truly behind him. Can you bring us up to speed with how he's going? And is he still exchanging barbs with Keir Starmer?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that that's a huge endorsement. You know, I think that despite the fact that Donald Trump has been saying that he's a good friend of Sir Keir Starmer and quite likes the guy, I imagine that will change pretty quickly. There's the Apple decision and a whole host of other issues where Starmer and the Trump administration are at complete odds with each other. So Nigel Farage receiving this endorsement at a time when every major opinion poll in the United Kingdom has his Reform Party beating the current government, the Labour Party administration, which is completely floundering in the polls. They are at a complete loss of direction and know-how. And they've had 14 years in opposition, yet all they could offer us is sort of conservative light politics. And it's absolutely deranged, and none of it makes sense, and none of it is especially popular either. So Reform have a real opportunity, a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Actually, I would argue that this is a once-in-a-100-year opportunity to do for British politics what the Labour Party did 100 years ago, which was to relegate the Liberals to complete irrelevance and to ensure that the Reform Party are the new right-leaning political party in British life. And that's young people alike. Young people are saying they would vote for Reform and Nigel Farage. He's got a phenomenal TikTok following. I think there are real moves afoot here, and that British politics is in for a real shake-up. This is the Trump effect on steroids throughout the world.
And are you confident that he'll be able to get there by himself? Will he have to do a deal with the Tories?
I don't think he would countenance doing a deal with the Tories. I honestly think that right now to say so, to suggest such a thing, would have people running away from you, absolutely horrified with such a suggestion. They feel utterly betrayed, Gabriella, by the fact that they were lied to and gave Boris Johnson a massive majority, only to receive net zero Brexit-like immigration-heavy lunacy large and nothing that was promised in that Conservative prospectus.
Yeah. Look, before I let you go, I have to talk to you about Meghan Markle. There's more trouble for her. Her new brand as ever. So she ditched American Riviera Orchard and she's saying she's focusing her efforts now on this new brand as ever. Let's take a look.
In 2 weeks, my show is coming out, which I'm so excited for, and also my business, which I think there's been a lot of curiosity about. Last year, I had thought, you know what, American Riviera, that sounds like such a great name, but it limited me to things that were just manufactured and grown in this area. Then Netflix came on, not just as my partner in the show, but as my partner in my business. And waiting for a moment to share a name that I had secured in 2022, and this is the moment. And it's called As Ever. As Ever essentially means as it's always been.
But there's already trouble for As Ever. She's been blocked from selling the clothing under that brand after a US trademark authority ruled that it was likely to be confused with an existing Chinese fashion company. So Darren, she's been desperate to try and get a lifestyle brand up and running. You just think about all the money that was wasted and spent on American Riviera Orchard. Now she's trying for something else. And it appears she hasn't really done her research with As Ever. How's this going to go?
Oh, yeah, it strikes to me as this is sort of this idea that there is an inherent privilege that Meghan Markle has, that she can, put forward names and suggestions of company names that have already been taken and not think about it because she just assumes that she'll get her own way. It's such an arrogant worldview. I mean, first of all, American Riviera Orchard, it sounds more like a naff perfume marketed in one of those dollar stores. And that was, as you say, a total flop, because who wouldn't want overpriced jam from a Hollywood mansion? I mean, what on earth does that jam taste of? Harry's guilt for his white privilege, what was in it? And now it's this as ever. It's a name that's so unoriginal, as you rightly identify. It's already been nabbed by a Chinese manufacturer. Brilliant. And you'd think with a legion of PR experts and lawyers, some of the most expensive on the book on speed dial, that someone along the pipeline would have flagged that a global trademark search is step one. Step one. And then you've got the coat of arms being pinched in a tiny village in Spain, and they're apparently suing as well. She's opened up a legal minefield. But I've no doubt, Gabriella, that in the end, the ultimate victim here will be Meghan Markle.
Oh, yes, and we will keep hearing about it, won't we? Darren Grimes, host of GB News. So good to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you.
MSNBC host Joy Reid's program, The Readout, has been axed, and that couldn't have come soon enough. As a news host, her analysis wasn't just full of lies. She earned herself a reputation for constant race baiting and making commentary that was divisive and unhinged. Her strong go-to argument was labelling Trump's team a party of racists and Nazis.
We've laid out the stakes in this crucial election, where one side stands for freedom while the other meets the textbook definition of fascism, namely a far-right dictatorial regime like Hitler's Germany or Franco's Spain or Mussolini's Italy, but also white-ruled South Africa before Mandela and the black majority took control, or Vladimir Putin's Russia, Viktor Orban's Hungary, or Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela today, that suppresses the rights of women and minorities, uses the military to execute the whims of a strongman dictator, and controls and suppresses the press, education, the arts, rewrites history to suit a favored and dominant racial class.
But she also used her program to mock police officers who wanted to make their own personal choices about their health and were fired because they didn't get the COVID jab.
Putting Americans in danger. Officers and unions who are fighting against vaccine mandates, which essentially means fighting to make the public sick, are tonight's absolute worst.
But what about the day-to-day issues, the issues that impact voters? Well, she missed the mark there too. According to Joy Reid, inflation isn't something that Americans really know about. Actually, it's something that they've been taught by evil Republicans.
The people I ever hear use the word inflation are journalists and economists, right? So that is not part of the normal lexicon of the way people talk. So it's interesting that Republicans are doing something they don't normally do, right? Which is not use the common tongue, right? Not use just common English to sort of do on their campaigns like they're doing with crime. But what they've done is they've taught people the word inflation, right? Yeah. Most people who would have never used that word ever in their lives are using it now because they've been taught it.
And her political analysis was just as sharp. She tried convincing her audience that Kamala Harris had an excellent campaign. In fact, it was flawless because she had woke celebrities on board.
I mean, this really was an historic, flawlessly run campaign. Queen Latifah never endorses anyone. She came out and endorsed. She had every prominent celebrity voice. She had the Taylor Swift. She had the Swifties. She had the Beehive. You could not have run a better campaign in that short period of time. And I think that's still true.
Just makes you wonder why her ratings were dropping. Let's bring in Brianna Lyman, elections correspondent at The Federalist. Brianna, thanks so much for your time. Look, Joy Reid has posted a video today, absolutely in tears, insisting that her show added value, and there was really no reflection about how divisive her program had become.
Yeah, look, Joy Reid, these tears don't really matter because just a few years ago, she mocked white women and white men for having white tears, said she didn't care, and now she's the one crying. Also, it's just kind of funny, like you said, there's no self-reflection, there's no introspection. She says that her show adds value. Look, when Donald Trump won the election, MSNBC's primetime viewership dropped 53%. It's since fluctuated a little bit, but it just goes to show you how many Americans have tuned out, and she does not realize that they've tuned out specifically to nonsense like hers that she spews. So the reason she thinks her show adds value is because she has yet to step outside that echo chamber. But now that she's been fired, she has plenty of time to do that.
And look, her show being axed is just a small step, I suppose, because you look at MSNBC's coverage and it's still full of fake news, so much Trump derangement syndrome and no balance. But there are also calls today for The View to go next, when you've got hosts like Whoopi Goldberg spitting when she's speaking about Donald Trump. Look at this.
No, you can't refute anything with him because he just, when I say him, I mean...
He rambles.
Trump.
Yeah.
He tends to just...
But can I mention one thing?
That's on the ABC, of course, but what a class act. I mean, spitting, speaking about Donald Trump, you can't make this stuff up. Should The View go next?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Sunny Hostin has faced challenges or she's been in trouble, let's say, by executives at ABC for some of these smears and lies that she spread. There needs to be some level of accountability with these talk show hosts. People tune in to left-wing networks. They expect to get a left-wing talking point. But what they shouldn't expect, or what we shouldn't treat as normal, is the fact that there is nothing but denigration and maligning of characters and character assassinations happening on these left-leaning networks with no actual analysis. You know, MSNBC was created to bring analysis to NBC's reporting, right? And NBC itself has just become just this left-wing psyop, essentially. But MSNBC, you expected left-wing analysis. They have gone overboard. And like you mentioned, MSNBC, this is not the big shakeup that we think it is. You know, they're going to platform people like Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, even more. These people are just as fringe and crazy as Joy Reid. So I'm not really sure what the internal deliberations are looking like, but hopefully they're going to bring some conservative voices on here if they're trying to make changes.
Absolutely, and some better analysis, I would like to say. Let's talk about Kash Patel, the FBI director. He's now facing mounting public pressure to release the client list associated with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Now, during his Senate confirmation hearing, he said he would do everything he could in assisting to expose those involved in Epstein's network. Here he is.
Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened in the past.
There's been a slight development. US Attorney General Pam Bondi said that the Jeffrey Epstein client list is sitting on her desk right now. And she's previously said that anyone named in documents related to Epstein who is still fighting to keep their names private will have no legal basis to do so unless they're a child, a victim, or a cooperating defendant. Here she is.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
Look, this is of huge interest to Americans. How quickly will these documents be released?
I mean, they already should have been released under the Biden administration, and they should be released under the Trump as soon as possible. Look, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell are the only two people in the world who are convicted of child sex trafficking, or at least Jeffrey Epstein, and apparently to no one, right? We don't know who they were sex trafficking children to. We do know that disclosed documents from years ago said that Bill Clinton likes him young. What that means remains to be seen, but there are definitely people that we need to have accountability for. And recently we saw P. Diddy. He is charged with similar, sex trafficking, horrific parties involving minors. There is a moral rot in our cultural and political elite here in the United States. And if we expect this country to survive, you have to root out that rot, because you can't have people who are leaders or in positions of influence allowing that kind of culture to seep into mainstream America. But that's what it's been doing. So I hope Pam Bondi releases this sooner than later so we can have accountability and we can clean out the moral bankruptcy that we're seeing in this country.
You mentioned the Diddy list there. That's something that Kash Patel has said that he's also going to fight for, so that can get exposed. What else can we expect from Kash Patel now he's been confirmed?
Kash Patel is a fighter for America. He is one of the only people who was willing to stand up to the Russia collusion hoax back in 2017, 2018 with the Nunes memo. So I expect Kash Patel to not only root out all corruption, but I also expect him, and I hope that there will be some accountability for the just onslaught that Donald Trump and the American people had to face during Trump's first term when they peddled this Russia collusion hoax, spent all of our taxpayer money on it, and you had people abusing the system, abusing the FISA court. So I think there's going to be a level of accountability that's on his to-do list.
Look, recently we saw Donald Trump sign an executive order to essentially protect women by banning biological men from competing in women's sport. So it's, of course, a huge win for women across America. But Marine Governor Janet Mills, she wants to be the hero and is refusing to comply. Yes, she's going to court to defy federal laws that protect women in sport. She's just committed to fighting for the right for biological men to compete against women. But Donald Trump was having absolutely none of it. Here is this exchange.
Is the Maine here, the governor of Maine? Well, are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good. I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
Look, I have to say, it's just so good seeing Trump in action, isn't it? Just not backing down.
It is so refreshing. And look, Donald Trump can do as much as he can do with these executive orders. It is up to Republicans in Congress, we have control of Congress and the Senate, to take action to codify these types of orders into law, right? Because Donald Trump, again, can only do so much. And when it comes down to this, if Democrats want to double down on these failed radical leftist gender policies that helped them lose in 2024, be my guest by all means, because 2026 will be an easy win for Republicans in the House. But ultimately, it has to be up to Congress to really codify these things because Trump is out of office in 4 years, and this craziness isn't going to end in 4 years.
No, it's not, unfortunately, but we'll watch this space very closely. But it's interesting, President Donald Trump, he's continuing to really dominate in the approval polls. A new Harvard-Harris survey found that he holds a 52% approval rating, 52%. Now, 58% say that he's doing better than Joe Biden. 81% say that they support deporting illegal immigrants, of course they do, and 76% support eliminating fraud and waste, and finally 60% believe that Doge is helping. I can't believe there's still 40% that are somehow against Doge. But looking at those numbers, what's your assessment? It indicates that it's pretty strong.
Yeah, it's really strong. It's also an indictment of how weak our propaganda press has become, because I think people have tuned out to the mainstream media or the left-wing mainstream media. We've seen it in polls. They've turned to X, they've turned to independent journalists and what have you. And as a result of that, they're getting the actual truth, the actual news, and not the media's spin on it. And I think that's contributing to Donald Trump's popularity because people are actually seeing what he's doing, not what the leftist mainstream media wants to pretend he's doing.
Brianna Lyman, elections correspondent at The Federalist. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thanks for having me.
That is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.